What happens when one of country music's biggest superstars walks into the lion's den of daytime television and finds himself face to face with one of the most outspoken, unfiltered hosts in American broadcasting? What unfolds is not just another celebrity interview gone wrong. It's a masterclass in standing your ground. A battle of worldviews that escalated from polite conversation to one of the most explosive confrontations in live television history. This is the story of the day Blake Shelton walked onto The View and delivered a verbal knockout that left Joy Behar speechless, the studio in chaos, and millions of viewers picking sides in a cultural war that had been brewing for years. Before you witness what happened next, understand this. What you're about to read isn't just entertainment gossip. This was a defining moment. When the mask came off, when Hollywood polish gave way to raw, unfiltered truth. And when a country boy from Oklahoma reminded the entire entertainment establishment exactly who he was, and who he would never be. The morning started like any other episode of The View. Studio lights blazed across the familiar set. Audience members settled into their seats with excited anticipation, and the production crew went through their well-rehearsed routines. Blake Shelton was scheduled as the guest of honor, there to promote his latest album and discuss his upcoming tour dates across America. It should have been softball questions, mutual laughter, maybe a plug for The Voice, standard promotional fare for one of country music's most recognizable faces. Blake entered the studio with his trademark confident swagger, that easy Oklahoma charm radiating from every step. He tipped his cowboy hat to the cheering audience, flashed that million-dollar smile that had graced countless magazine covers, and settled into the guest chair with the relaxed posture of someone who'd done this dance 1,000 times before. The audience responded warmly, their applause genuine and enthusiastic. Here was Blake Shelton, coach on The Voice, chart-topping artist, beloved figure in American entertainment. What could possibly go wrong? The other hosts greeted him warmly. Whoopi Goldberg offered her customary professional welcome. Sarah Haynes smiled brightly, clearly excited about the musical guest. Even Sunny Hostin seemed genuinely pleased to have him on set. Everything was proceeding exactly as Blake's publicist had promised. Friendly, light, promotional, easy morning television. But Joy Behar sat unusually quiet during those opening moments, a predatory smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Anyone who'd watched The View long enough recognized that look. It was the look of someone loading their ammunition, waiting for precisely the right moment to strike. Those who knew Joy's pattern understood what was coming, even if Blake himself didn't see the trap being set. The first few minutes of conversation flowed smoothly. Questions about the new album, commentary about his role on The Voice, pleasant banter about life in Nashville. Blake answered each question with practiced ease, his Oklahoma drawl adding authentic charm to every response. The audience laughed at his jokes. The other hosts nodded along appreciatively. For those brief, shining moments, it seemed like just another successful celebrity appearance. Little did Blake know, the temperature in that studio was about to drop to Arctic levels. Well. Joy finally spoke, her voice cutting through the pleasant atmosphere like a blade through silk. Look who decided to grace us with his presence. She leaned forward slightly, that razor-sharp smile widening. Blake Shelton, the voice of rural America. Or should I say, the voice of a very specific part of rural America. Blake's smile never wavered, but something shifted in his eyes. A slight narrowing, a subtle recalibration. Good morning to you too, Joy, he replied, his tone still friendly, but with an edge of caution. Always a pleasure to be here with you lovely ladies. Oh, cut the charm offensive, Blake. Joy shot back, waving her hand dismissively. She was leaning forward now, fully engaged, her entire body language shifting from casual observer to active prosecutor. Let's talk about your recent comments about small-town values. You seem to think that living in a small town automatically makes someone more moral, more patriotic, than the rest of us city dwellers. The other hosts exchanged glances. The audience, so buoyant moments before, fell into an uneasy silence. Whoopi Goldberg, ever the professional mediator, attempted a gentle redirect. Joy, maybe we should. But Joy was just getting started. I never said that, Joy, Blake replied, his Oklahoma drawl becoming more pronounced. A tell that anyone from his world would recognize. What I said was that small towns teach you certain values. Community, helping your neighbors, working hard for what you have. I didn't say anything about being better than anyone else. Oh, please. Joy waved her hand again, her voice dripping with dismissiveness. That's exactly what you implied. You country music stars love to paint yourselves as the real Americans, while the rest of us are what? Fake Americans? We're just as American as you are, Blake. Blake's jaw tightened imperceptibly. His hands, which had been resting casually on the armrests, pressed down slightly harder. But he kept his composure, maintained that professional veneer. Joy, I think you're putting words in my mouth that I never said. I respect people from all walks of life, whether they're from New York City or from a town with 3,000 people. Do you, though? Joy pressed, her voice rising slightly, gaining momentum like a storm building on the horizon. Because your music, your whole persona, it's built on this idea that real America is somewhere out there in the heartland. And places like New York, places like where I grew up, somehow don't count. The studio air grew thick with tension. You could cut it with a knife. The audience was dead silent now, sensing they were witnessing something far beyond typical daytime television fodder. Camera operators glanced at each other nervously. In the control room, producers were already frantically signaling, uncertain whether to let this play out or cut to commercial. Sarah Haynes attempted to jump in with a question about Blake's music, trying desperately to steer the conversation back to safer waters. But Joy wasn't finished. Not even close. You know what bothers me most about this whole small-town superiority complex? Joy continued, her hands gesturing emphatically, her entire being now locked onto Blake like a missile on its target. It's that you get to sit there and judge the rest of us, while making millions of dollars singing about pickup trucks and dirt roads. You've been living in Hollywood and Nashville for decades, Blake. When's the last time you actually lived in one of these small towns you're always singing about? Blake's relaxed demeanor began to shift. His shoulders straightened. His spine grew rigid. For the first time since sitting down, he looked genuinely annoyed, not just defending himself, but personally affronted. The easygoing country boy was starting to crack, and something harder, something more dangerous, was beginning to show through. Joy, Blake said, his voice controlled, but with steel underneath. I may live in Nashville now, but I haven't forgotten where I come from. I was raised in Ada, Oklahoma. Population 12,000. My dad worked construction. My mom was a beauty shop owner. I know what it's like to grow up in a place where everybody knows everybody. And now you're worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Joy shot back without missing a beat, her voice rising with each word. You've got mansions in multiple states, private jets, the whole 9 yards. Don't you think it's a little disingenuous to keep playing this common man card? Blake's famous smile, that easy, disarming grin that had charmed America for decades, finally cracked. Shattered, really. You know what, Joy? His voice had changed entirely now. Gone was the promotional tour politeness. This was something raw, something real. Just because someone becomes successful doesn't mean they forget their roots. I've been blessed. Absolutely. But that doesn't change who I am or where I come from. And I'm proud of where I come from. Proud enough to exploit it for profit? Joy retorted, leaning back slightly, clearly enjoying the reaction she was getting. Her eyes were bright with the thrill of the chase. Your whole brand is built on this mythology of simple country folk versus sophisticated city people. It's divisive, Blake, and frankly, it's getting old. The tension in the studio was palpable now. Electric. Crackling. Every person in that room could feel it, the point of no return approaching fast. Whoopi tried once more to steer the conversation in a different direction, her voice carrying a note of warning. Maybe we should talk about the tour. But Blake was no longer interested in playing nice. Exploit it, Blake repeated, his voice rising for the first time, genuine anger bleeding through his professional facade. Joy, I write and sing about my life, my experiences, the people I grew up with. That's not exploitation. That's authenticity. And if you can't tell the difference, maybe that says more about you than it does about me. The studio gasped, an audible, collective intake of breath. Even the cameraman froze for a split second. This wasn't banter anymore. This wasn't friendly disagreement. This was a full-scale confrontation. And Blake Shelton had just fired back with both barrels. Joy's eyes flashed with pure anger. Her face flushed slightly. Her hands gripped the desk in front of her. Authenticity. She practically spat the word. Give me a break, Blake. You're about as authentic as a $3 bill. You're a manufactured product, just like every other country star churned out by the Nashville machine. The audience gasped again, louder this time. Even the other hosts looked uncomfortable now, shifting in their seats, exchanging worried glances. This had gone far beyond typical daytime television banter. The boundaries of professional discourse had been obliterated, and they were careening into territory no one had anticipated. Blake stood up slowly. It was a power move, calculated or instinctive. It didn't matter. The effect was the same. At 6 feet 5 inches, Blake Shelton towered over the panel, his frame suddenly seeming larger, more imposing, more commanding than anyone in that studio had expected. The cowboy had risen, and the entire dynamic of the confrontation shifted in that single movement. You know what, Joy? His voice was measured now, controlled, but carrying an undercurrent of ice-cold fury. I've sat here and taken your shots because I respect this show, and I respect most of the people on it. But I'm not going to sit here and let you attack my character and my integrity. Oh, did I strike a nerve? Joy taunted, standing up as well, clearly unwilling to concede the physical advantage. Her voice dripped with sarcasm. The truth hurts, doesn't it, Blake? The truth? Blake's voice was steady now, dangerously calm. The truth is that you've been sitting behind this desk for years, throwing stones at people, tearing them down, making nasty comments about anyone who doesn't share your worldview. And you call that entertainment? Joy's face flushed deep red. I call it honesty, she shot back. Something you might want to try sometime. Blake shook his head slowly, a gesture of profound disappointment, more cutting than any words. Honesty would be admitting that you'd already made up your mind about me before I even walked in here. You don't want to have a conversation, Joy. You want to pick a fight. Maybe I do, Joy replied defiantly, her chin raised, her stance aggressive. Maybe it's time someone called you out on your act. The studio was electric with tension now. Every eye was locked on the confrontation. Cameras kept rolling, capturing every word, every gesture, every micro-expression. The producers had given up trying to control the situation. This was live television gold, controversial, explosive, the kind of moment that would dominate news cycles for weeks. Blake looked down at Joy with a mixture of disappointment and anger, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper that somehow carried more weight than any shout. You want to call me out? Fine. Let's do this properly. Then he paused, letting the moment stretch, building the tension. You sit there every day criticizing people you've never met, places you've never been, experiences you've never had. You talk about small towns like they're some kind of joke, like the people who live there are beneath you. Joy leaned back in her chair, arms crossed defensively, but her voice remained combative. I never said they were beneath me. I said, your portrayal of them is fake. My portrayal. Blake's voice grew louder, losing that careful control. I didn't read about it in a book or watch it on television, Joy. I lived it. I lived in a place where when your neighbor's barn burned down, 20 families showed up the next day to help rebuild it. Where when someone got sick, the whole community rallied around them. That's not fake. That's real life. Oh, spare me the Norman Rockwell painting, Joy interrupted, her voice sharp and cutting. Small towns have problems, too, Blake. They have poverty, addiction, close-mindedness. But you never sing about that, do you? You only sing about the pretty parts. Blake's hands clenched into fists at his sides, his knuckles going white. You think I don't know about the hard parts? My hometown has struggled with factory closures, young people leaving because there aren't enough opportunities. I've seen families lose everything. But you know what? Those same people who are struggling still look out for each other. They still have dignity. They still have heart. And they still vote for politicians who keep them struggling, Joy shot back, her voice rising to match his intensity. But I suppose that's not something you want to talk about either, is it? The other hosts were frantically trying to signal for a commercial break, waving their hands, making cutting gestures across their throats. But the confrontation had taken on a life of its own. A runaway train that no one could stop. There it is, Blake said, his voice quiet now, but somehow more dangerous for it. There's the real agenda. This was never about my music or my authenticity. This is about politics. This is about the fact that you can't stand that there are millions of Americans who don't think like you, who don't vote like you, who don't share your vision of what America should be. Those millions of Americans are being manipulated, Joy countered, her voice sharp and accusatory. By you, by the media, by politicians who tell them what they want to hear instead of what they need to know. Blake took a step closer to the panel, his voice rising with genuine passion. Who decides that, Joy? Who decides what people need to know? You, the media, politicians? Or maybe, just maybe, people are smart enough to decide for themselves. Joy slammed her hand on the table, the sound echoing through the studio like a gunshot. Not when they're being manipulated by celebrity millionaires who pretend to be just like them. Blake stood perfectly still for a long moment, staring at Joy with an expression impossible to read. The studio held its collective breath. Then, slowly, deliberately, he reached up and took off his cowboy hat, an action loaded with symbolism that everyone in that room understood. You know what, Joy? His voice was eerily calm now, the eye of the hurricane. You're absolutely right about one thing. I am a millionaire. I do live a different life now than I did growing up. He placed his hat on the table in front of him with deliberate precision, the gesture carrying more weight than any shout could have. But there's one thing you're dead wrong about. His eyes locked onto Joy's with laser intensity. I've never pretended to be anything other than exactly who I am. I've never lied about my success. I've never hidden my wealth. I've never claimed to be something I'm not. He paused, letting the question hang in the air like a blade. Can you say the same? Joy's face went pale. The color drained from her cheeks as if Blake had physically struck her. What's that supposed to mean? Her voice was smaller now, uncertain for the first time. Blake's smile was cold as ice, devoid of any warmth or humor. It means maybe before you start lecturing other people about authenticity, you should take a long, hard look in the mirror. The studio fell into an uncomfortable silence. No one moved. No one breathed. Even the camera operators seemed frozen, uncertain whether to keep filming or look away from what was happening. Joy's face cycled through several emotions: shock, confusion, anger, and finally settled on pure, undiluted rage. "How dare you?" she whispered, her voice trembling with fury. "How dare you come onto my show and attack me personally?" Blake picked up his hat and placed it back on his head with slow, deliberate movements, each gesture carrying symbolic weight. "Joy, this is The View, not the Joy Behar show. And I'm not attacking you personally. I'm responding to your personal attacks on me. You think you're so clever, don't you?" Joy's voice was getting louder again, shriller, losing the controlled venom from earlier. "Coming in here with your folksy wisdom and your Oshucks routine. Well, let me tell you something, cowboy. I've been in this business longer than you've been wearing that ridiculous hat." Blake's eyebrows raised slightly, a hint of genuine amusement crossing his face. "This business? You mean the business of entertainment? Because last I checked, we're both entertainers, Joy. The only difference is, I don't pretend my entertainment is more important than anyone else's." "My entertainment?" Joy stood up straighter, her voice reaching a crescendo. "I inform people, Blake. I educate them. I help them understand the world around them. What do? You help them escape from reality. And what's wrong with that?" Blake asked, his voice calm in stark contrast to Joy's escalating volume. The juxtaposition made his words cut even deeper. "What's wrong with giving people a few minutes of happiness? What's wrong with helping them forget their troubles for a little while?" Joy laughed bitterly, the sound harsh and ugly. "Because while they're forgetting their troubles, those troubles are getting worse. While they're listening to your songs about simpler times, the world is passing them by." Blake shook his head slowly, disappointment etched into every line of his face. "Joy, you talk about informing people and educating them, but all I've seen today is you trying to tear me down. Is that what you call education? Is that what you call helping people understand the world?" "I'm helping them understand that people like you are selling them a fantasy," Joy shot back, her composure completely gone now. "A fantasy that keeps them from demanding the real changes they need." "And what changes are those, Joy?" Blake's voice had an edge to it now, sharp and cutting. "What exactly do you think I'm keeping people from demanding?" Joy gestured wildly with her hands, her entire body language screaming frustration and anger. "Better jobs, better health care, better education for their children. Instead of fighting for those things, they're content to live in your make-believe world where everything is simple and pure and good." Blake was quiet for a long moment, studying Joy's face with an intensity that seemed to see right through her. When he spoke, his voice was softer, but somehow more dangerous, a whisper that cut deeper than any shout. "You know what I think? Joy, I think you're angry because people find comfort in things that don't come from you. I think you're angry because despite all your lecturing and educating and informing, people still choose to listen to simple songs about simple pleasures." Joy's face turned bright red, her hands shaking slightly. That's not what this is about, isn't it?" Blake pressed on, taking another step forward, his presence filling the space. "You can't stand that people find joy in things you don't understand, things you don't control. You can't stand that someone like me, someone you think is beneath you intellectually, can connect with people in ways you never could." "You don't connect with people," Joy practically screamed. "You manipulate them. You feed them lies about how great things used to be, so they won't notice how bad things are now." Blake's laugh was harsh, bitter, nothing like his usual warm chuckle. Joy, I've never once said things used to be better. I've never said people should go backward. I sing about appreciating what you have, about finding happiness in your family, your friends, your community. If that's manipulation, then I guess I'm guilty. You are guilty, Joy said, her voice breaking slightly, tears of frustration threatening to spill. You're guilty of keeping people satisfied with less than they deserve. Blake stared at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Not pity exactly, but a kind of sad understanding. Then slowly, he began walking toward the edge of the set. You know what, Joy? His voice was tired now, worn down by the confrontation. I came here today to talk about my music, to have a conversation with you and your colleagues. But clearly, you had a different agenda. Where are you going? Joy demanded, her voice becoming shrill with panic at losing control of the situation. We're not finished here. Blake stopped and turned back to face her, his expression unreadable. Yes, we are. Because there's no point in continuing this conversation. You've made it clear that you don't want to discuss anything. You want to attack everything. Joy's voice became desperate, grasping. I want to discuss the truth, Blake. I want to discuss your responsibility as a public figure. My responsibility. Blake's voice was incredulous. Joy, my responsibility is to my fans, to the people who buy my music and come to my shows. My responsibility is to be honest about who I am and what I believe. I don't owe you or anyone else an apology for that. You owe it to the American people to stop feeding them this small-town mythology, Joy shouted, her composure completely shattered now. You owe it to them to stop pretending that ignorance is bliss. Blake's face went stone cold. Every muscle in his jaw tightened, his eyes turned hard as steel. And there it is, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. You just called millions of Americans ignorant. You just called people who live in small towns, people who work hard and raise their families and try to do right by their neighbors. You just called them ignorant. I didn't say that, Joy protested, but her voice lacked conviction, the words weak and uncertain. Yes, you did, Blake said firmly, pointing directly at her. You just said it. And you know what? That tells me everything I need to know about you and your version of education and information. The other hosts sat frozen, their faces masks of shock and discomfort. Whoopi had given up trying to intervene. Sarah looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. The entire studio had become a powder keg, and Blake Shelton was walking away while it detonated behind him. Just walk away, Joy called out as Blake continued toward the exit, her voice cracking with emotion. You can't just run away when someone challenges your beliefs. Blake stopped one final time. He turned back to the panel, his cowboy hat shadowing his eyes, his stance wide and solid. Joy, you haven't challenged my beliefs. You've insulted me. You've insulted my fans, and you've insulted millions of Americans who don't happen to share your worldview. That's not a challenge. That's just mean-spirited. The truth is mean-spirited sometimes, Joy replied defiantly, lifting her chin in one last show of defiance. Blake nodded slowly as if accepting that statement. You're right about that. And the truth is this. This show used to be about different perspectives having a conversation. Now it's apparently about one perspective shouting down all the others. With that devastating final observation, Blake Shelton turned and walked off the View set. His boots echoed in the stunned silence. The studio audience sat frozen, mouths agape, unable to process what they'd just witnessed. Behind the panel, Joy Behar stood alone, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the desk for support. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every moment of her humiliation, every second of the aftermath of what would become one of the most talked-about confrontations in daytime television history. Security personnel moved quickly, but unnecessarily. Blake wasn't causing a scene. He was simply leaving. Producers scrambled, frantically, trying to figure out how to salvage the rest of the show. The control room erupted in controlled chaos, voices overlapping, everyone talking at once about what had just happened and what it meant for the show, for the network, for everyone involved. The heated exchange had lasted less than 20 minutes from start to finish. But those 20 minutes would be replayed, analyzed, debated, and discussed for years to come. Clips would go viral within hours. Social media would explode with reactions. News organizations would cover it as a major story. And America would be divided once again, not just about politics or geography or values, but about who was right in that studio confrontation, and what it revealed about the deeper fractures in American society. What started as a routine promotional appearance became a cultural flashpoint. A moment when the carefully maintained illusions of polite entertainment were stripped away and replaced with raw, unfiltered confrontation. Blake Shelton walked into that studio as a country music star there to sell an album. He walked out as something else entirely, a symbol of defiance against coastal elitism, a representation of millions of Americans who felt constantly judged and dismissed by the entertainment establishment. Enjoy Behar, who had started the day thinking she would expose a hypocrite, ended it having revealed something about herself that no amount of spin could entirely erase. Was Blake right to walk off? Did Joy cross a line that should never have been crossed? Did the confrontation reveal fundamental truths about American society? Or was it just another manufactured controversy in the endless cycle of outrage content? The answers depend entirely on who you ask, where they're from, and what they believe about the America we live in versus the America we imagine ourselves to.